Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating journey back to ancient Greece to uncover the rather shocking truth behind one of history's most famous names. Honestly, if you think you know who Pythagoras was, prepare to have your mind totally blown. We're going to be looking at the man, the myth, the math, and, well, the mysticism. Seriously, think about it for a second. Ask anyone on the street about Pythagoras and they'll instantly mumble something about a right-angled triangle and a hypotenuse. You know, we basically just associate him with dusty chalkboards and standardized tests. But what if I told you that the guy who supposedly invented that famous theorem was actually the charismatic leader of a deeply secretive, fiercely political, and mystical religious sect?
So, let's break this down. You've got the textbook Pythagoras, right? The undisputed father of arithmetic and geometry, this purely rational scientist. But then you have the historical Pythagoras. Based on ancient sources, this version of Pythagoras wasn't just some math guy. He was an aristocratic politician, a philosopher whose ultimate goal was literally to save human souls, and the founder of a closed community that functioned very, very much like a modern-day cult. Let's explore how these two seemingly complete opposite identities are actually exactly the same person.
Section 1. The Man and His Cult. A Secret Brotherhood. The whole dramatic arc of his life actually kicks off on the island of Samos. Pythagoras had some pretty strong aristocratic tendencies, and, well, he didn't exactly get along with the local tyrant, Polycrates. So, around 530 BC, he packed up and relocated to Croton in southern Italy. And he didn't just open a casual math school there, he founded a religious brotherhood. This sect had serious heavy-duty political ambitions. They aimed to establish aristocratic rule and actually gained massive influence, almost operating as a political party across multiple cities. But it didn't last. Around 500 BC, a violent democratic uprising burned down their meeting houses, which forced Pythagoras into exile in Metapontum, where he eventually died. So yeah, this was high-stakes ancient politics. Now, if you actually wanted to join this highly exclusive sect, you couldn't just pass a math test. You had to follow an incredibly strict, honestly kind of bizarre set of rules that dictated your entire way of life. Just think about some of these taboos for a second. You could not eat beans. You were strictly forbidden from touching a white rooster. If you dropped something on the floor, you absolutely could not pick it up, and most importantly, you could not eat meat. I know, it sounds a bit like the world's most stressful dinner party, but this wasn't just eccentric behavior. These were deeply sacred rules for a community obsessed with ritual purity and the salvation of the soul.
Section 2. Reincarnation of the soul, the Wheel of Births.
So the core of their whole belief system was this concept called metempsychosis, or the transmigration of the soul. The Pythagoreans believed that the soul is completely separate from the body, and more importantly, that it's immortal. Basically, when you die, your soul doesn't just vanish into thin air. It migrates right into a brand new physical body. They believed we are all stuck in this continuous, endless wheel of births, just cycling through different bodies over and over again based on our moral actions in past lives. The ultimate goal of their entire philosophy was to live such a pure, strict, ascetic life that you could finally break that cycle and return your soul to its true divine home.
And you know, this perfectly explains their absolute non-negotiable ban on eating meat. To Pythagoras, since a soul could migrate into literally any living creature, that sheep or cow you're about to have for dinner might actually contain the reincarnated soul of a deceased human being. It could literally be a friend or a relative. As one ancient source rather bluntly put it, eating an animal was essentially an act of cannibalism for the Pythagoreans.
Section 3. Universe made of numbers. Math as the arche.
Now, this is where things get really fascinating, because we see how a simple observation turned into a massive philosophical leap. The Pythagoreans were studying music, and they realized something incredible. Musical harmony, like an octave or a perfect fifth, is created by exact, mathematically perfect ratios in the length of a vibrating string. They discovered that math wasn't just some boring tool for counting sheep or whatever. It was the hidden structure behind beautiful, tangible sounds. And in a stroke of absolute genius, or maybe fanaticism, they generalized this idea. They figured, hey, if music is just math, then maybe absolutely everything is math. They declared that the arche, meaning the foundational principle and substance of the entire universe, is simply number. To actually make sense of a universe made entirely of numbers, they categorized all of reality into 10 foundational dualities. They basically believed the universe was in a constant state of tension between order and chaos. On the side of perfection and order, you have principles like limit, odd, one, right, male, good, and square. And contrasting that, on the side of imperfection and chaos, you've got unlimited, even, many, left,
female, bad, and rectangle. For the Pythagoreans, limit was the ultimate good because it gave form, structure, and mathematical definition to the chaotic unlimited.
But out of all the numbers out there, one stood head and shoulders above the rest as truly divine, the number 10. They viewed 10 as so deeply, inherently perfect that it completely dictated their view of outer space. No joke, they counted the visible celestial bodies, the stars, the 5 known planets, the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, but they only got to 9. Now, because the universe absolutely had to be mathematically perfect in their eyes, they literally just invented a fake, invisible 10th planet called the Counter-Earth purely to make the math add up to 10. It just shows you exactly how far they were willing to bend reality to fit their numerical theology.
Section 4. The irrational number crisis. Math breaks religion.
So imagine for a second that you've built your entire worldview, your whole political system, and your literal hopes for eternal salvation on this one core belief, that everything in the universe can be perfectly expressed as a rational ratio, just a neat, tidy fraction of whole numbers. The ancient Greek word for this is logos, which means ratio, but it also means meaning and rationality itself. But what happens when the universe betrays you? What happens to your reality when you find a number that just goes on forever with no pattern and absolutely cannot be expressed as a ratio?
Well, disaster strikes, and it strikes via their very own incredibly famous Pythagorean theorem. It's wild. If you have a right triangle where the 2 shorter sides are exactly 1 unit long, the hypotenuse is the square root of 2. And the square root of 2 happens to be an irrational number. This simple geometric fact completely destroyed their entire philosophy. Reality wasn't entirely rational. According to legend, a Pythagorean named Hippasus of Metapontum discovered this horrifying truth, and even worse, he revealed it to the outside world. This was considered such a world-shattering heresy that the sect supposedly took Hippasus out to sea and threw him overboard to drown. Math was, quite literally, for them, a matter of life and death.
Section 5. An enduring scientific legacy. Beyond the cult. Despite all the drama and secrecy, just look at the historical heavyweights influenced by this philosophy over the centuries. Pythagoras directly influenced Plato. In fact, in his later years, Plato pretty much adopted the Pythagorean view that forms, or ideas, are actually mathematical numbers. Fast forward a bit to the dawn of the scientific revolution. Copernicus's whole sun-centered model of astronomy directly inspired by Pythagorean models. Titans of science like Galileo and Descartes were totally captivated by the Pythagorean notion that the universe speaks the language of mathematics. It's what allowed them to take messy, qualitative physical properties and reduce them down to pure, quantifiable geometry and physics.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this. The foundational blueprint of all modern science, this prevailing idea that beneath our messy, chaotic physical world, there lies a clean, predictable, mathematical order. Well, that wasn't invented in some sterile modern laboratory. It was dreamed up over 2,500 years ago by a mystic sitting in southern Italy who was just trying to purify his soul so he wouldn't be reincarnated as a bean-eating chicken.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Sure, we've stripped away the robes, we ditched the taboos against touching white roosters, and we dropped the reincarnation stuff, but we kept the very core religious belief of that sect, the absolute faith that the universe is made of numbers. So as you go about your day-to-day, trusting your GPS, relying on your computer, and trusting the physics of the buildings you walk into, ask yourself, are we all still unknowingly participating in Pythagoras' ancient mathematical cult? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the numbers.